G'day all, it's another video. So I've been getting kind of back into my PC gaming a little over the last few weeks, mainly because I've been watching a lot of Phil's Computer Lab. Hello Phil, fellow Aussie on the other side of the country, and I've got 2 or 3 videos that I've got planned, and part of that is that I wanted to get in a few gamepads and joysticks and stuff like that. So this is actually the first of those videos. And the first one I got in was this one, and I was specifically actually looking for this, mainly because, well, being a QuickShot Starfighter, it's possibly one of the most average joypads there is. But I got it completely boxed, as you can see. So we'll take a quick look, we'll pull it out of its packet, we'll give it a test. I'll show you some comparisons compared to a couple of others I've got, and we'll take it from there. So this one here is a QuickShot Starfighter 5 for IBM PC XT80 386, 486 and compatible. So I guess if you've got a Pentium, you're shit out of luck. New digital design, no trimmer required. Now, that might seem a bit strange, but joysticks at least earlier to this usually had trimmers for adjustment. So that's that. Now, being probably one of the most average gamepads around, it shouldn't actually surprise you with this little sticker at the bottom, QuickShot 35 million sold, because although they weren't considered certainly the most greatest gamepad around, there was a lot of them sold. A hell of a lot. And if we have a look, I'm not going to be able to read that. So we've got our features on the side, new digital design, no trimmer required, compatibility, automatic centering, couple of fire buttons, turbo fire selector, and a 6-foot cable with the old 15-pin gamepad, game port connector on the back. And basically, there you go. There's not much to it. It's a D-pad, it's a turbo button and a turbo switch and a couple of buttons. So let's open it up and have a look inside. I think some of the cellophane is already pretty overage. Won't need a knife for that. Alright, now I've literally not opened this. I've never touched it, I've never played with it, so you're going to see everything there is to see. And in the box we get, come on, caught underneath the bit of cardboard. Oh, come on. There we go. That's it. There's nothing else in there. So we have a gamepad, and yeah, look to be about a 6-foot cable with 15 DB15 male plug on the end to plug into a game port that computers used to have on their sound card, and this is it. It feels hollow, but not completely horribly put together. Actually, I mean, it's not creaky or anything. Ooh, okay, maybe it is a bit, but it doesn't sound creaky and it doesn't feel creaky. The D-pad is kind of lacks any kind of tactile feel, so that's not great. And the buttons are nice and clicky, I'll give it that. The buttons are nice and clicky, and you got your turbo fire switch. Now, if I have a look on the box here, this says, it said here somewhere, copyright 1992. So we'll take that as we'll say that's the release date, 1992, which would be about right. So you're kind of looking at your, what are we looking at, 1992, kind of, what, late 486, early Pentium 1 kind of days. So nice smack bang in the middle of the era of boring beige. And yeah, that's the joypad. Now, I've got a couple of others to actually compare this with, so if we just put that to one side. In about 1996, Microsoft brought out their Sidewinder range, and I've got a joystick to show in another video, but this is the original Microsoft Sidewinder gamepad. It's light, there isn't much to it. It certainly doesn't feel as cheap and as nasty as the QuickShot. there's nothing going on there with the D-pad. There's no click. It's just kind of mushy. Start and mode buttons, an M button, and 6 kind of mushy, they're not too bad, and a couple of triggers. And an odd shape. A lot of people say this looks a bit like the Saturn controller. I've never actually used a Saturn, so I wouldn't know, but it's an odd shape. These are all this is very pointy, and I've got pretty big hands, but it's not uncomfortable to hold. Yeah, that's actually not too bad at all. Now, these are obviously what you would consider kind of vintage gamepads, I guess, or retro, or something along those lines. It all depends on your definition of what's vintage and retro, I suppose. And then, obviously, by the time we hit kind of the mid to late 2000s, Microsoft kind of had set the standard when it came to gamepads with the Xbox 360 controller. Now, this is the PC variant. It means it's got a USB plug on the end of it. But this is just an Xbox 360 controller for the PC. And a lot of people, including myself, still think this is possibly the best controller ever made, be it the Xbox One. I know a lot of hardcore PlayStation fanboys actually do like this gamepad. And again, I've got fairly big hands because I'm a fairly tall guy. But yeah, the D-pad actually feels like you're doing something. Obviously now we're in the age of analog control sticks, and the buttons feel nice, and we've got a couple of triggers. But that's more of a modern comparison. When we get to testing this will be kind of a case of this is, well, closer to what we are now compared to the other two. The main reason I wanted to get a couple of joypads and and joysticks in is that there's certain games, like I grew up with PC gaming, I honestly did, but I did have consoles and stuff when I was a kid. And one thing the consoles did teach me is there's certain games that, as much as I grew up playing, Duke Nukem and so forth on the PC with a keyboard, they're just that little bit better with a gamepad. And so there's certain games like car racing games, although a steering wheel is obviously the best way of doing that, but car racing games and platformers, I just like using a gamepad, regardless if it's on a console or a PC. Mind you, to this day, I can still not play a first-person shooter with a gamepad. I can't. My brain just does not let me play a first-person shooter with a gamepad. But some games, like I said, platformers and car racing games, quite happy to have a gamepad. So let's plug these in and see how they go actually playing them on a PC. I'll be plugging them into my little XP game box, which is actually a subject for an upcoming video, but let's give them a test and see how they go. So we're going to start these tests. I'm going to start with the QuickShot, and we're going to play some Duke Nukem. The QuickShot, once you bind the keys, is all good. Nothing exciting to set up. Just went into Control Panel in Windows and added just a 2-button gamepad, and it just worked. Feel and so forth, I mean, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. It bends a bit if you grip it too hard. The D-pad is kind of tactile enough, I guess. It's not too mushy. I'd probably put it kind of a similar feel to maybe not quite as good as a Mega Drive, but that kind of feel. Buttons are clicky enough. And all in all, it just kind of works. I don't think the build quality on it is fantastic, but I will now plug in the Sidewinder and see how that goes. The Sidewinder is now plugged in, and we'll see how this goes. It's more comfortable, obviously, because you've got actually something to hang on to with your fingers, but I don't know, the D-pad's just kind of, it's a bit mushy. Just, there's no real feel of that you've hit left or right or whatever. The buttons obviously all work. Setting up in Windows was simple enough of going into, again, control panel and just selecting Sidewinder, because obviously being Microsoft, it's there. But I don't know, it's just kind of, it just doesn't have that just quite enough clickiness to either the D-pad or the buttons to kind of make me happy. So yeah, that's the Sidewinder. I'm not blown away by it. It's more comfortable than the QuickShot, but I don't know. It's just not, the trigger buttons are a little better, but I don't know, the actual buttons and the D-pad on it, I'm not a fan. All right, so now we will plug in the 360 controller and see how that one goes. We're now back in Duke with the 360 controller. I've actually set it up for the right-hand analog stick because it just kept playing silly buggers with the actual D-pad. So we're going to see how the analog stick goes in a platform, which actually works really well. It's funny, for a long time I was never an analog stick fan. I don't know why, it just wasn't. But I've kind of, out of nowhere, gotten the hang of it. And it works perfectly fine in a platformer like this. It all works fine. The buttons are clicky enough. They've just got that right amount of tactile feel. It's comfortable. Without a doubt. I mean, that's one of the big things about the 360 controller. And yeah, it works. The buttons feel nice. The analog stick feels nice. And it's a great controller. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to spark up a driving game. I'm going to use Test Drive Unlimited. And we'll run through the controllers again. So here we are in Atari's Test Drive Unlimited. Now, this is obviously a fairly modern game, relatively speaking, especially compared to the other two gamepads, and it really is set up for something like the 360 controller, which I've left plugged in. It is designed to be used with an analog stick or a steering wheel or something along those lines, but regardless, let's see how we go. Now, obviously, the analog stick makes this kind of game work really well. It's nice and accurate.
Your destination is 2 miles away.
And yeah, it just works, and it's comfortable, and the buttons are responsive. So is the analog stick. And yeah, I mean, this is the kind of gamepad really that this game is designed for. So that's a 360 controller. Let's now plug in. We'll go back to the Sidewinder and see how that goes in a modern game like this. So we're back in Test Drive, and I've got the Sidewinder plugged in. Now, if you haven't guessed, this is actually probably my least favourite so far, but we'll see how it goes. The D-pad actually is nice and responsive. I will give it that. I think I was meant to turn there. And so, you know, it does work. It's comfortable to hold with my big hands, and it does work. And the buttons are still mushy. I still don't like that. And the actual D-pad is actually quite deep, so you can, if you really want to, just put your thumb in the middle of it and just squirm it around. But I don't know. It's just, I guess it's just not my cup of tea. So that's the Sidewinder. Now we'll go all the way back to the QuickShot, and we'll see how that goes. So one more go of Test Drive Unlimited, and we have the QuickShot plugged in. Now, you remember this is a gamepad that really kind of dates from the early 90s. So we're talking, kind of Mega Drive, Super Nintendo kind of era. So we'll see how we go. The D-pad definitely is nice and clicky, and I do like that. It doesn't feel particularly responsive, especially compared to, come on, turn, especially compared to even the Sidewinder. So we'll give the Sidewinder that. But, it does work. The buttons are clicky enough. And so, it is usable in a modern game like this. Obviously, these kind of games are also designed to have a lot more buttons on the gamepad or the controller that you're using. So you would probably find yourself flipping, constantly reaching for the keyboard anyway. But, it works, and it is nice and responsive. That was the turn off. Let me just back up. And yeah, so that's the QuickShot in Test Drive Unlimited. So in the end, that's 3 gamepads for the PC. Both 2 from very much the 90s, and then a modern one. Obviously, it's pretty unfair to compare these 2 here with the 360 controller. I mean, the 360 controller is 10 years newer than even the Sidewinder. But it is it's interesting to see where gamepads for the PC from, say, the early to mid 90s have come, because this is still, I would consider this a perfectly good modern gamepad. But yeah, the comparison isn't fair, but it is interesting to see where things have come. So taking that one out of the picture for a second, out of these 2, I was actually quite surprised. The Sidewinder does just it lacks any real kind of tactile feel. The triggers don't feel bad, but everything else just kind of feels bleh. That's the best I can put it. It's bleh. And this one actually ended up feeling really well. Obviously, for the more modern games like Test Drive, it should really have more buttons, and it really needs, triggers up the top and things. But obviously, that wasn't, when this was released in, 92, that wasn't even a thing. And so it actually isn't all that bad. And it's perfect for playing things like, I was playing Duke Nukem, and I'm sure even if you got, say, Sonic Mania, you could on Steam, which is it's still a current game, I would call it, a modern game, you'd be quite happy playing it on this. So that's the QuickShot Starfighter 5 and the Sidewinder gamepad, with a bit of a comparison of the 360 controller thrown in. And that's kind of it. Thank you for watching.